Our clerk today is Miss Sheila Gurry. The question period sign-up sheet is on the desk by the computers. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding the agenda, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of the question period, I will call those who have signed up to the podium to address council. Introduction of late items.
Thank you, Chair. There are no late items today.
Thank you. A motion for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Thornton, seconded by Councillor Martin. All in favor? Carried. Motion for the adoption of the minutes as circulated. Moved by Director Bonner, seconded by Councillor Bonner, Councillor Armstrong. All in favor? Carried. Number 5, reports. We have a report under Community Wellness and Livability, the 2020 Strategic Policy Development, and I believe Mr. Lindsay will be introducing.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Council. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to be back in front of you this afternoon to talk about, if I can get that PowerPoint, to talk about a report you have in your packet about 2020 Strategic Policy Development Process. And the intent of the PowerPoint is just to walk through a little bit and highlight some parts out of that report. We think DPC is the place to begin to have this initial discussion. There's a few things that we're hoping will generate some discussion and some debate amongst council, and we're looking for some input on this afternoon. I do have a few speakers. You're only going to hear from me a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it over to a number of speakers. You're going to hear from Lisa Bopalsing, Madeline Coe is going to speak to you, Annalisa Fipke, and Farnaz Faroki. And I noticed they've all got their planner black uniforms on this afternoon, dressed appropriately to talk about planning in the city. First thing I want to talk about is the title here. And if we're coming to talk to you about doing an official community plan review, you'd expect to see OCP launch, OCP review. The reason it doesn't say that, and this is hopefully one of the themes we get through today, is there's a number of plans that are at a point where they need to be reviewed, updated, initiated. And we don't want to embark on a number of different processes, engaging with the community at all different points independently. We think there's a real opportunity here to look at a number of our plans at the same time, engage the community at one time, make sure that we, make sure the plans are importantly coordinated, but that our engagement with the community and our response to the community is a coordinated response. So the strategic policy development process is an umbrella for the review of a number of documents. And we'll talk today about what we've coined the big 3, the official community plan, the Parks, Rec and Culture plan, and the active transportation plan. There are, and I don't want to leave it at just those 3 plans, because there are a number of plans that Council's aware of that we're in the process. There's the economic development strategy, there's the water supply strategy, amongst others, and those are outlined in the report. But we're going to spend a little bit of time today, and we're going to have speakers that are going to talk about those big 3 plans, a little bit of an introduction on the history of those planning documents, what they've done, how they've served the community, looking forward, their strategic importance, and what are the next steps with those documents. So quick touch on each of those. Really hoping today, if nothing else, you walk away with an understanding of what's the work plan over the next 18 months as we go through this review. How will that process unfold? What will be our process to work through? And importantly, how council will connect into that. So where will council be asked to make decision points? We'll be talking about that. Where will we be coming back to you at regular intervals for updates? And then at the end, council's role in adopting any of the plans that are finally adopted. We also hope you get a sense of the engagement process we're about to embark on. Again, a coordinated engagement process covering all of these plans. And finally, and if you looked in your report, you've already seen it, the idea that we put some guiding principles on the table. We think there's some things that are very important to this council. We've had about a year to work with you now, and either through your strategic plan or in other motions, we believe that there are things that are important and top of mind. And our thought is, if they are that important, then let's just say it off the start. Let's be open about it. So we have some guiding principles in this report. We're asking this afternoon, council, did we get that right? We're going to show you what we've come up with. It's an opportunity for council to have a debate about, did we miss something? Is there something there that shouldn't be there? But really the idea that ultimately at the end of the today, you're comfortable and say, this is the work plan we want to follow, and these are the guiding principles we believe in, and we want council to endorse them. So the recommendation we go from this table to council to endorse those documents. At this point now, I'm just going to turn it over to each of your speakers to talk about the big three and then how we plan on embarking on this process. I think Lisa's up first. Ms. Colcom.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to start off by first talking about what the OCP is, and I know that all of council are very familiar with this document. I will be going into a few things because we do have an audience here today who may be less familiar than council with some aspects of the plan. So why is it important strategically? Then I'll be going through how it's been implemented, and then moving forward, why things change and how we see moving forward with the OCP, building on some of the successes of the last few years. So, OCP, Official Community Plan. Official because it's adopted by bylaw by council. We have the authority to create the OCP through the Local Government Act, but when I think of O in the OCP, I think of our. It's our community plan. It's, for years, Nanaimo has had, starting with Imagine Nanaimo back in 1992, then Plan Nanaimo in 1996. Nanaimo has had a history of creating community plans for our community. And in terms of strategic importance to council, the OCP is basically a framework that tells council, or is a guide for council, on how to respond to growth and development opportunities that are presented before them. It also provides certainty to the community about what they can expect by guiding future growth in neighborhoods. It also is key to determining where we can expect growth in residential, commercial, and industrial in our community. And essentially, it reflects the community's vision. A major part of all the different processes since 1992 has been a high degree of community engagement. And councils of the day have used this to endorse a plan that reflects the community's vision for the future. And so, as we've seen over the transition from Imagine Nanaimo to Plan Nanaimo, we've seen an increasing strategic direction around environmental changes and responding to climate change. We know our current council puts a strong priority on that. Since the Plan Nanaimo was last revised in 2008, we've known that there have been many changes on the climate change front in terms of mitigation and adaptation. So these are things we want to look at going forward. So basically the OCP sets a framework of land use, and you'll see behind me is the future land use map, which is a key part of the OCP. It also outlines environmental areas that we want to protect, and it can cover aspects of also social policies and other pieces. An important part of the OCP, and actually before I go too much further, I'd like to actually acknowledge the teamwork that's led to even this presentation, to the work today. In the background have been 3 members of my team, Brian Zurich, Chris Schulberg, and Karen Kronstall, who have been integral to the work we see today. So while I'm the person speaking, behind me is a lot of collaboration that's led to this, and also a lot of interdepartmental collaboration. So you'll be hearing from Madeline Coe and Ms. Fipke about how their departments have been working collectively with us, with the OCP being the framework for a range of other strategies. So you'll be hearing from Ms. Coe about the Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan update. You'll be hearing from Ms. Fipke about the transportation, the Sustainable Active Transportation Planning, and these all fit within the OCP. So if you think of the OCP like an umbrella plan, you've got Council Strategic Plan, then you've got the OCP, and then you've got a series of other plans. Another piece about the OCP has been, we have a series of neighborhood and community plans that provide more definition to areas of the OCP from the community's perspective. So in terms of implementation, and actually I'm skipping to the next slide now, we have a series of neighborhood plans, and you'll see in the implementation section of our current 2008 OCP that we've achieved some of the direction For example, the Brecon Neighborhood Plan, the South End Neighborhood Plan, the Hospital Area Plan. All of these are built on the foundation and direction of the official community plan and now form part of it. The affordable housing strategy is also another one of the social objectives and policies in the OCP, and the affordable housing strategy came out of implementing the OCP from that perspective. The transportation master plan that was done in 2014, that's another plan that came out of the foundation of the official community plan. Another piece I'd like to mention is as well something that hasn't come before council yet, and it's the work that's been spearheaded by Chris Schulberg, and that's the archaeological overview assessment. And we're in the process of finalizing that with our First Nation partners, and we'll be bringing a draft to council consideration. And that's again another important piece of implementation of the OCP, and also a study that will guide us as we move forward with reviewing the OCP. So, another piece about the OCP has been that between Imagine Nanaimo in 1996 and then 2008, there was a transition between looking at how growth occurred in our city, with a real focus on what's called nodal development, so our town centers like Woodrow, downtown, for example, and the hospital area, and also corridor development. And these are things, I'm going to point to a map over there that shows a series of very recent developments. And if you look at where they're occurring along our corridors and our nodes. And that's an important piece of implementation for us to consider as we want to build on the successes of the past OCP policies that are working and look at what we need to refresh and change. So an important part of the focus of our work is looking and bringing to council reports and studies about what's been working well, what fits in with council's future vision, the community's future vision, and what needs to be tweaked and changed. So building on that success, as I've mentioned, incrementally with each iteration of the OCP, we've been seeing increasing emphasis on environmental considerations, for example, and also social policies as well. And so building on that, we know very clearly from council the importance of climate change mitigation and adaptation. And so that's something that we want to see built on. Checking my notes to do justice to my team so I don't forget anything. So one of the things we also know is that as part of the OCP, we are required to engage with adjacent local governments, including our First Nations governments, and also the regional district of Nanaimo. Now, many of you sit on the board of the regional district of Nanaimo, and you're familiar with the regional growth strategy. And one part of the OCP review will be ensuring that our official community plan is in sync with our agreement with our partner municipalities at the RDN, and working with them to have those conversations. So the other piece too is council has made it clear that they have put a strong priority through the protocol agreement working group with Nanaimo on the relationship with our Indigenous partners in government. And so that's another piece with which we can look at moving forward with the OCP. So since 2008, a lot has changed in our community, our demographics, our knowledge of different legislation, our knowledge of our environmental conditions. And like me, a person who said they never wear pink, things change. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Ms. Cole, who will talk.
Councillor Armstrong.
I just have one question. When we're talking about when we're engaging with partners, I'm always concerned that we're not engaging with School District 68, especially when we're building, when we look at the new proposed sandstone development. That has a huge impact on them because their schools are over capacity. Is that something that we could build in this one, please?
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, absolutely. I regret missing that. I actually had SDs here in my notes. So one of the things that I think has been a strong foundation, particularly with our Parks, Rec and Culture Department, is that partnership with the school district. We have some exciting projects as council has signed off on with the school district, and we've even had some initial conversations about them providing updated demographic information on their forecasting for where they will need land for schools. So that's absolutely a really critical piece of the conversation. And we're seeing some exciting partnerships, as you know, with the Niagara School District and ourselves. So.
Thank you.
And I guess I would also mention in that vein, BIU is another partner where we initiated conversations. Mr. Corson and members of our team met with BIU to talk about their role in the OCP engagement. So lots of moving parts and more details to come.
Thank you.
Okay, so open to Ms. O, we'll talk about parks, recreation, and master plan.
So I'm going to provide an overview of the purpose of a Parks, Recreation, Culture, and Facilities Master Plan for the city, and then go over some of the existing content and opportunities to review some of the content of the existing plan. So the purpose of the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan, as described in our current document, is to guide the development of recreation facilities, parks and open spaces, and to guide the delivery of services that best meets the needs of the community. So our existing plan was adopted in the year 2005, and so it's been guiding our departmental accomplishments for the past 14 years. So at this point, 14 years later, nearly all of the directives in the existing plan have been addressed. So this leaves us in a position where we have opportunities to renew some of that content to guide us through the next 10 years. So what that would look like, so we have opportunities to identify current demands for new recreation facilities and services, revisiting opportunities to enhance cultural development, refreshing service delivery directives in light of emerging recreation trends, and existing community needs and community demands for service. We also have the opportunity to renew directives related to parks and open space management and acquisition opportunities. And as previously mentioned, to build upon some of our partnerships that we have to deliver services. So in addition to renewing some of the existing plan content, which I just went over, we also have an opportunity to consider adding new content to the plan to modernize it for our present context. So this would include looking at opportunities for climate change mitigation and examining Parks and Recreation's role in that, our role in environmental conservation and enhancement, looking at opportunities for urban agriculture development, examining Parks and Trails' role in active transportation and being part of that network, which we'll be looking at in collaboration with the transportation team, and making sure that Parks and Rec services are inclusive to all members of the community. So with that, I will pass it over to Annalisa Fipke. Thank you.
Councilor Bonner.
Thank you. Question to you, Senator. The Benton Park Master Plan and the Cultural Plan that the city has. I was under the impression from the last election that the Culture Plan sort of has been treading water since it was first done up, I believe, in 2014. And that many people in the cultural sector just wanted us to change the date and just carry on with it. Is that what we're looking at doing, or are we looking at redoing the whole plan? Because it doesn't look like, I know you, in the Parks and Recreation area, we've done most of the things in that plan, but that one hasn't had a lot of work done.
So through the chair, I think this would be best directed to Richard Harding, if he was here.
Yeah, no, good question. So the initial plan for cultural, creative culture came out of the last master plan when it was in the Parks, Recreation, Culture section, and then that section moved over on its own, and a number of different reorganizations. So I think a number of those initiatives have been moving forward, and the section that's been working on it. In myself and Lisa Popal-Singh's discussion with some of the cultural groups is there's still a lot of things in that existing cultural strategy side of things that we can continue to work on and refresh. So again, on the overall engagement component, what we want to do for all the plans, is how do we refresh some of those engagement and say where are we, what still needs to be done, what can we bring forward, saying these aspects still need to work on, these we've achieved, we can put those behind us, and what can we move forward, if that helps with it.
It does. So there is a question asked is, that's into 2020. Could we just look at the plan now and say, okay, we haven't done these ones, let's just carry on continuing to do those ones, and then out of that, go like, so like we're still doing things and not just going out and reaching out to communities so that 2020 we start fresh.
Right, well, I would say we're still as staff going to be bringing, as these plans are ongoing, there's still a number of initiatives and programs and projects that are continuing on, regardless of these plans. I don't believe we're stopping a lot of those initiatives. So these are really, I think that's a good question in the sense that we're going to not stop doing things until these plans are done. That's definitely not the intention. There may be some strategic initiatives the council may want to review prior to agreeing with some, because there's going to be a lot of competing community desires as we go through this. There may be some the council as we bring forward to you. So well, maybe we should wait till these plans are done. But I still think there's a number that are going to come to council and say, we've had this in the 5-year capital, or this is a program that another partner has been working on. We're here to support them. You're going to want to continue to work with that. And then in the cultural side of things, definitely, as in sports areas and culture, as in other development areas, those things will still proceed, is my assumption.
One more, if I may. It has to do with the climate change and mitigation. Along the same lines is, to me, we would just take our existing plans and look at them in a lens of climate change, mitigation, net zero, that sort of things, as opposed to redoing a plan and putting it in there. It's one of the things like when you get up in the morning, you always, have a shower, get ready to go to work. You don't make it a part of your plan. It's just something you always do, and if something else changes, you always look at doing that. Probably a bad analogy, but I'm trying to think of it as we should be doing this anyway with the existing plans. And say, okay, this plan says this, how do we mitigate that through climate change, as opposed to going to all the trouble to write it into the plan. I'm just saying, just to toss out an idea there.
Through the chair, what comes to mind for me is that some of the terminology that we've been using maybe in the staff report is to say, to look at this through a lens of climate change mitigation and environmental conservation. With that being said, there's also a climate change adaptation strategy in the works right now, which I don't know the latest update on that or what has been presented to council so far, but that does kind of look at it specifically, but it's an organization-wide strategy that should feed into everything as you're saying. And I don't know if anybody else might want to add to that from staff.
Mr. Harden?
Through the chair, what I can say is when Lisa gets back up in a minute and talks about the process for what the BARCON, she will include in that a little briefing on kind of the work that we've done today, and then touch on that plan and the work that's underway and how it'll be critical as we feed into these to the review and development of some of the plans.
Great. Mr. Harding, do you have a comment on this today? Is there a hand right up there? Okay. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Coe, thank you very much. I'm sure all of council would agree with me that all of the plans referenced in this report today are extremely important to all of us. At a personal level, my interest has always been Parks Recreation, and I just wanted to congratulate, first of all, Mr. Harding and his staff for the achievements that they have completed over the past 10 years or so. And I certainly look forward to the initiatives that will be brought forward to examine how we can improve facilities and enhance them in the following 10 years. Possibly related to Director Bonner's comment regarding the cultural aspect of this. I think one of the challenges, what did I say?
Director.
Oh, did I? Well, I wasn't the first one to say it. Councillor Bonner. I think part of the challenge has been that, quite frankly, culture has bounced around during the past several years, and I'm pleased that it's finding a home once again with Parks and Recreation. And I just wonder if staff could comment on the appropriateness of that placement and the value that you see coming because of it.
I think again, I would recommend getting Richard Harding to answer that one.
Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. A couple updates for councils that I think that this council's really helped in bringing that back is that the posting of the new manager of culture and special events was posted this week, or was last week. With that, the special events coordinator that's also be under the cultural umbrella will be posted right behind it. And until that position is finalized, then the rest of the culture staff will move over officially to Parks, Recreation, and Culture. That being said, we've been working closely with Ms. Football Singh and with some of the cultural groups on that transition since the reorganization has been established, and working with them on some of those initiatives. I think one of the things that's really been always key, we've always did work close together, but because of the major cultural facilities have still always been kind of overseen by Parks and Recreation, it's again that the continuation of those relationships and building on those relationships with those facilities. Did that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. With that, I will pass it over to Annalisa. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Annalisa Whitby. I'm a transportation engineer here in the city. And I'm here to talk to you about the active and sustainable transportation plan, which will guide and prioritize our projects to achieve a healthier and more livable community. It will support cultural shift towards a more environmentally responsible and sustainable future. And it will facilitate internal and external collaboration so that we can be looking at land use, our trail network, our transportation network, so that we can plan a more holistic mobility network. So, strong foundation. The Transportation Master Plan was completed in 2014, and this remains our guiding document. That hasn't changed. However, with updating, the plan is updated every 10 years, and we're kind of at the halfway mark, 5 years. And so we are looking at what we've accomplished. Multi-year projects. We have tackled the Harewood Bikeway, the Dover Bikeway, the Boundary Bikeway, the Georgia Greenway. We are kind of en route to working on and developing and proceeding with Metro Drive, Wayside Avenue. So a lot of awesome projects that are underway. Community partnerships. We have partnered with cycling coalitions in Nanaimo to hold events such as Go by Bike, Bike to Work Week. We've met with the RCMP and collaborated on events such as the Pedestrian Safety Day. We have met with School District 68 to revive and work on our Active and Safe Routes to School program. We have also worked with, met with Island Health to see how we can kind of collaborate from the active transportation side of things. What else have we done? Oh, CNIB, Canadian National Institute for Mobile. I've been meeting with them and walking some of my projects so that we can ensure that accessible design gets kind of wrapped into all of our projects. And then emerging best practices, whether it be us, we've been meeting with engineering consultants in town to update our engineering standards to kind of show and produce a more multimodal network. We have been updating / creating our complete street guidelines, which will also help in that respect, as well as learning from other municipalities, including even the Ministry of Transportation, which only 2 months ago came out with their active transportation design guidelines. So, yeah, lots of good things happening. So building on success. The Transportation Master Plan still remains our kind of guiding document, but the active and sustainable transportation plan will just kind of build on that. One of the things is that the Transportation Master Plan used face-to-face surveys to understand usage, the modal shift. So going forward, that's kind of unsustainable to be able to continually do face-to-face surveys. So to have additional counters on the ground, to be able to use crowdsourcing and Strava and heat maps to be able to measure usage of where people are using our network. Confirm community expectations. So as I mentioned, a number of the projects that we have kind of been under the works and are in construction, are these projects meeting the expectations of the community? Are the level of service or level of safety that they're seeing, are they happy with it? And in that, we're refining our implementation strategies that we currently have outlined in the Transportation Master Plan. And then educate and promote. You know, we have events, like I said, about bike to work and go by bike, but there needs to be kind of an overarching all year round education and promotional campaign for us to encourage users, to make sure that the people that are using our system and helping us achieve the modal shift are all ages and all abilities.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Just be quite blunt, this is the plan that I struggle the most with, and whether it's required, because I see a lot of things in the transportation master plan that address routing, and there has been some implementation, but not complete networks. So then that gets me on to, if we're measuring usage, if that data will have any meaning in the sense that if you're not already, people aren't going to bike that aren't already biking because of the network. So we'll be measuring that 1 or 2% that are willing to go out there and use the network, rather than sort of maybe that more face-to-face that sort of says, hey, how do we get you out using the network? What is confirmed community expectations? That's another one for me. To me, that's a hard one until we've implemented correctly, and implemented sort of that minimum grid, which I don't think we're there. I think we're getting close, and there's some projects online. And educate, like I just look at this and think it's a lot of effort, and I don't necessarily see the gain in the advantage of doing it when we have a plan that puts pedestrians first. Yet we have a plan that puts pedestrians first, but I'm not sure we have a philosophy that puts pedestrians first yet, and cycling. So I just have some concerns with this, and I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze on this, and if it's actually required. Did you want to?
Well, failing the fact that Jamie is here, unfortunately, to kind of speak to this, I think that it is important. I've done some consultation with the process before I have to talk to people, and I think that with emerging technologies, e-bikes and stuff, the strategies and that were laid out in the transportation is ever evolving and changing, and I think that with those technologies, those do morph the priorities, even just industry best standards, right? Like 5-10 years ago, a painted bike lane was great, sort of thinking. Now people are wanting more separation, and we're trying to achieve that kind of all ages, all abilities. So I think that some of the implementation strategies need to be looked at with that.
So we have Mayor Crowe, and Councillor Thorpe, and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, and I think this was the, I'm going to give a shorter version of the question that Councillor Brown was raising. One of our frequent correspondents has said, in evaluating the effectiveness of the current plan, there is no review of what the city has actually invested or done to improve active transportation since 2012, which should be a critical part of any program review. But they're going to measure how it was used. This is a classic case, and you can't determine the need for a bridge by counting the number of people who are swimming across the river. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on that, or anyone could comment on that. And then there's a second one.
So, Your Worship, I think, through the chair, I think certainly with respect to the statement, I like the statement about to use it while measuring people swimming across the Riverfield Bridge, and I think that's a prime example, and Ms. Fipke mentioned it with the Greenway project where the new bridge was built. Obviously, there was no pedestrian connection there between those schools and those commercial centers previously, and how do you measure something like that? We go out there today and we've opened a bridge. I think it provides a spine through that community and a new connection. And we are measuring it, are going to come back to you with some data about how many people are using that. But it would have been hard previously, based on data alone, to make that case. So I think it is important to get out. In that case, a lot of direction and forethought went into that, going back to the neighborhood plan. And it was through those discussions that we'll be having through the OCP with the neighborhood about identifying those opportunities. It wasn't purely a data exercise, it was a visioning exercise with the community that resulted in that. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but certainly on the measuring.
Again, through the chair, thank you, Mr. Lindsay, for your response. The second one is, quote, staff recommends additionally the transportation plan will include a component of public education to provide residents with tools to age in place, offsetting the need for significant capital infrastructure investments. Honestly, what does this mean? It sounds like instead of investing in actual infrastructure to make pedestrians a priority of plane, instead you're going to educate us on how to walk on a road with no sidewalks or safe crosswalks, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
Through the chair. I think the acknowledgement is that engineering is expensive. You know, and we have these plans that outlay these short and long, medium and long-term goals. And I think sometimes the disconnect of not achieving those, and that we need to have these tools in place for the public, whether they be the aging or the youth, so that they're able to navigate the network in its current state safely and confidently. And I think that's super important until those projects that we have outlined are constructed and finished.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bonner.
Oh, thank you. It's amazing that Mayor Crook was able to pull those quotes out. I didn't think you were on social media, but somebody got it to
They
you.
emailed us.
Through the chair, if I may comment, we all got it.
On that same vein, I think that's important because I drive on a bike on the roads, and the roads are not safe. And there are some people who will always drive on the roads, and they have about $5,000 worth of spandex and a bike at the same price. And I'm not one of those. And I'm there a lot of times for political reasons, if anything other than I don't have a car at that time. But the thing is, in order to get the more people on the roads have to be safe. And we need to do things that make the roads safe, as opposed to explaining to people how they can travel on unsafe roads safely. So I think you will get more people on the roads if we make them safer. And that includes, sweeping the lanes that are designated as bike routes, painting lines on the roads that are designated as bike routes, which don't exist right now. So I think our time would be better spent doing that, and I'm hoping we are doing that, as opposed to finding ways to educate people on how to work within a system that's not safe. And I think that's where that comes up as a bit of an issue, right? To me anyway, is I'd rather see us spending the money making the roads safer than teaching people how to navigate unsafe roads. Personally, thanks.
Councilor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of comments, one following Councillor Bonner's. The roads are inherently unsafe for pedestrians and cyclists because of thousands of pounds of metal moving alongside you. There's just different momentum. But I disagree with this idea that we need to wait for infrastructure in order to create a cycling culture. I think we have investment in policy that need to obviously catch up with what we all want to see, and I think this council is very invested in seeing that investment and seeing that policy develop. But I also think there's a component in the community whereby, don't cycle on the highway if you can avoid it, don't cycle on the main arteries if you can avoid it, but really we need people riding your bike and showing drivers that cyclists are on the road is going to do as much, in my opinion, to keep people safe, to change that culture, as much as painting bike lanes. Now, I know all the research supports that we need to have painted bike lanes or barricaded bike lanes, and I agree with that, and I will continue to push that politically. But I don't like this idea that we need to wait for that infrastructure in order for people to feel safe on bikes. I cycle all over the city. I don't own much spandex, but you can do it, and I would encourage anyone with any desire to do it, and to do it as safely as you can. Stay off of terminals, stay off the highway. There's ways around the city. So that was my comment, my question. The measuring usage, I think this is really important for us to establish a baseline. The Transportation Master Plan was created in 2014. Have we been measuring that plan identified that active transportation is at the peak of what we want to see grow in our community. Have we been measuring it along the way, or is this our first opportunity to measure how far we've gone from 2014 to now? And further to Mayor Crow's comments, do we have an idea of how much we've invested in sidewalks, how much we've invested in bike lanes in comparison to population growth? So, sorry, that was two different questions. The measuring usage, is this our first opportunity to get a sense of how we've been doing with that transportation master plan?
Through the chair, more or less, yes. We've been measuring the kilometers of bike lanes that have been installed, but we've had no way to measure who's using them, what age brackets, or the number of people. So that's where the counters come into place. That's where EMAPs and Strava come in place, and outsourcing to be able to measure those.
And thank you for that, if I may. This idea of we've built this many bike lanes and this many sidewalks, is that something that we can offer to the public as far as our investment goes in active transportation? And use that as a comparison with our population growth? I think numbers are what's going to drive policy and investment. And I think in some ways what Councillor or Mayor Crow's email was getting at is that we have this plan that says, yes, pedestrians are at the top, but we really don't have a sense of how we've been doing on that. Are we meeting our targets? Are we not? Are we just going to write another plan that puts pedestrians at the top again, but not have any measurables? So is that information that we could give to the community?
Yes, it is. However, yeah, like we can't really, the kilometers and the number of miles doesn't really help understand the overall picture. Like the whole, the fearless percentage of people that would have biked on the road, regardless of whether there was a weighted bike lane or not. For us to be able to see the modal shift occur and to be able to measure that is when we start seeing the women and the children and all ages and all abilities. So, okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you. I am the car driver, there's no doubt, but I do have a bike, which I'm trying to use.
An e-bike.
But I do agree with what Councillor Hammond said. I think it's really important. Like for me, I don't have the confidence to be on those main roads, so I'm not. I'm going through neighborhoods. I'm planning routes that get me through neighborhoods. There's now new research out that says painted bike lanes aren't safe. They're actually better off not having them. So I've always believed we should be going, the bike should be going like pedestrians, going towards traffic, and there's studies that actually are showing that now, believe it or not, in the States. Anyhow, but I think the issue is if you're going to go by value driven, most of the community will tell you they're not used much. So that's why this plan is important. If you want to get people into that, you need a plan. Because right now, I bet you there's less than 2,000 people that regularly bike in this community, and maybe 4,000 that walk, versus a 90,000 population. So if you're talking about that in a democratic society, we wouldn't even have those things. That's why we have to be visionary. I think the other thing that we're thinking about that people forget about, this town was built years ago. It doesn't have the infrastructure to support a lot of what we're asking for. Or if we want to do it, we better be prepared to really open up the purse strings, because I'll tell you, to build just a little bit, about a kilometer of sidewalk is probably close to 500,000. So we got to think about that. It's not like it's cheap to do this stuff. So we have to, if we want to do it, then we're going to have to prioritize that and not do other projects. So I think it's really important that when we think about it, that's things. I agree that we should be teaching people to be safe on these roads, because they're not going to change it in their future. You don't know how many times I drive by people who are walking with traffic instead of against. They're taught not, you're supposed to be taught to walk towards traffic. It's safer for everybody. And when you see somebody walking towards you as a driver, you pay far more attention than if you're going beside them. You don't care. But when they're coming towards you, it's human nature to react to something coming towards you versus you having control going that direction. So I think it's really important. I'm not a huge fan of the plan, but I think it's important that it's there, and I think they're going in the right directions. When you say measuring it, you can't measure it. We were counting cars one day, and we saw one bike in 5 days going up the Turner Road. So, you can say, is that a waste of money? For some people, yes, but if you want to get people out of the car, it's not. So that's where you have to have the political will to say, yeah, the majority aren't. And we're also an aging population. We're going to be 60% over the age of 50 in the near future. Those people aren't biking, very few of them, because of the hills in this community, unless they can afford the e-bike. So we got to think of all that. I personally, that's why I was in support of building more sidewalks versus the $40 million downtown. Because there's a lot of this area in this community. Hammond Bay, you go for stretches of sidewalk, then you got to walk on the road. Then you go for stretches, another sidewalk. I think we should be looking at that and investing in those areas that need those. Thank you.
Maybe the tax on spandex.
Councilor Thorpe?
I don't wear spandex, sweats.
Councillor Brown has his hand up, Chair.
Yeah.
I've already spoken.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you very much. Through you then. So I recognize that this is about active transportation, which I totally support. I like most components of the plan as it's outlined. But I'm always uncomfortable when we have these discussions because it seems to me that we end up in a us versus them
Yes.
type of dialogue where we're talking about pedestrians or cyclists versus car drivers. And I think that's really unfortunate because although I hope that we will see an increase in the number of people walking and cycling, the reality is as our city grows, especially with the demographic that Councillor Armstrong referred to, I think we're going to see more and more cars on our streets too. So I guess my question is, are you hopefully working, as you do your planning, working in close conjunction with our traffic planners and our street engineers so that you can help each other?
Good to share? Yes.
Good. Question answered.
We're one team. But yeah, just to highlight as well, in regards to, there was a couple comments in the, just the importance of us collaborating together with the park network versus the transportation network. The average Nanaimo doesn't care whether their route to work or school is on parkland or road right, right? So to be able to integrate those together, to have one cohesive network is.
Councilor Bonner?
Thank you. Just a comment regarding Councillor Armstrong's there. I cannot count the number of times when I've been biking that elderly couples have passed me on hills because they're buying these e-bikes, and some of them are passing me with just regular bikes, which is a bit but it's, in talking with the bike sellers, couples buying bikes is happening, and those are elderly couples who and want to spend time biking on our city infrastructure. So even though our age is getting older, they're getting older and buying bikes. So that's
I have a quick comment. Thank you. Since January, I put 3,000 kilometers on my e-bike commuting, and have been all over the place. And I can't tell you how I light up when I'm coming down 4th and there's a painted bike lane, little sections on Bone Road. They absolutely make a huge difference to safety. I commute down Inn and Trail twice a week, and the number of people that are using that more and more and more, and the amount of e-bikes. I have a 72-year-old uncle who's bought an e-bike living up in the Sherwood Forest area, Departure Bay, and there's 4 or 5 people in that area that are investing in e-bikes. I absolutely agree that there is a change in usage that we do need to investigate. I do share a bit of the concerns, and maybe these concerns are ill-placed, that we absolutely need to invest in infrastructure and quickly to get the lanes in place and the minimum grids, and to rest some of our worries aside that we're not maybe spending money and resources on planning where we could, and taking it away from the actual implementation. We don't want to implement things that are unnecessary because we don't have the proper data. So I think having that concern aired and for us to adjust, accordingly is that, because I do know that when they build it, they'll come. Down in Victoria, they have invested in bike lanes, and it is crazy the amount of people that are using these lanes and these routes more and more each year. And there's enough proof around that that is the case and the trend that when it's built, people will come and use it, and that people just need to feel when they bring their bike out for the first time, and it's like, oh, this is for bikers, and there's spots for it. And so thank you for the painted lanes that are already there. Thank you for the focus on active and sustainable transportation. It sounds the message is loud and clear that this council is serious about this and wants this, and there seems to be a good focus on it. So I'm excited for what's come down the pipes. Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you. Wonderful points. Just a follow-up on the measuring usage, and hearing you say that we haven't been able to measure usage from 2014. Just putting this out there that I think if we're going to develop a plan, embedded in the plan, we also have to have an understanding of how we're going to measure how we're implementing the plan. Otherwise, really there isn't, we don't have a way to determine whether we're being successful or not.
Councillor Vaughn.
this.
Sure. That's Councilor Brown.
Gotta use your
Too
binoculars.
many bees, yeah. And a gavel.
I think great points, Councilor Gesselbark. I just really think it needs to be emphasized though that we have a transportation plan that puts the pedestrian first. We have 100 years of emphasizing the automobile. I think it is time for active transportation. I really would hope that this plan is going to give us a lot of value added. So like, I think the Metro project's great. It's just a shame that it's halfway, right? We've funded half a road that we know people travel the whole road to complete a north-south spot. To me, that is highly problematic when we're trying to convince people it's safe to come out of your neighborhood and travel to another neighborhood. And so if this plan adds value in saying that we're not going to do these projects until we can make sure that we have outcomes rather than just outputs, right? Not just 10 kilometers of road, we have a modal shift of 3%. That's important. That's where I'm a little afraid on our more overall philosophical approach that we're just emphasizing more planning rather than the actual modal shift.
Councilor Cummins?
Nope.
Oh, sorry, Mayor Cove.
If I can say something that I would like to think is of a positive nature, that I want to compliment staff for the approach of dealing with these three altogether, because with respect to all the comments around encouraging people in terms of active transportation and basically walking, the far more effective thing, I think, to reduce automobile use in this community, apart from obviously an excellent transit system, which is a regional district responsibility, is to encourage the kind of development that our plans actually encourage. With great respect, I don't think a whole pile of people are going to end up biking in the same way they use their cars in the next 1,000 years. With great respect to everybody, it's just not going to happen. But if you create neighborhoods with the nodal concept that's already working and in place that enables them to live within walking distance of the things they need on a daily and regular basis and incorporate that into their lifestyle, we will reduce our carbon footprints, promote a healthier society, and I think that that's why it's so important that these three be brought together. And I just want to compliment staff for the work they are doing with those concepts in mind.
Councilor Turley.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not sure who to address this question to, so I'll throw it over. So there was, at one time, I assume it's still there, a partnership ability for sidewalks where residents, if they so chose to have better sidewalks in front of their properties, they could partner with the city on whatever percentage. Is that also available for improving bike lanes, or is that just for sidewalks?
Through the chair, Councilor Turley, I think what you're referring to is the local improvement programs, which have been used from time to time throughout the city. Probably the best and most local example is Wesley Street, where the merchants at that point participated through that program and resulted in the improvements you see on Wesley Street today. So they helped pay for those. Sidewalks, I can't think of any specific projects where sidewalks have been done. I think more of sewer and water, the things that benefit those immediate property owners. Of course, the challenge with a bike lane, to get it long enough that benefit you as a resident to your destination, whether it's school or work, could probably go and take a large part of the community and a little bit more comprehensive planning than maybe a local area improvement plan. Certainly, it's a tool that's available, but I just can't do it. Time limits.
Okay. Is that it for that section? Thank you, Mr. McKee.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we turn it back to Ms. Bopal here in a minute, just going to start on the discussion on kind of this process and talk a little bit about where we plan to go in the next few months. Just a couple things. And first of all, thanks for the debate and the discussion. This is exactly why we want to be at GPC, is to kind of hear this and have this discussion fleshed out a bit. A couple things that come to my mind, though, and first of all, and I agree with many of the comments around the table, I agree that we do have a good transportation plan. And as a planner, I stand up here and say that because at its heart, our transportation master plan is a land use document. It recognizes the critical importance of getting the land use part right if we're going to get the transportation right. And likewise, if we were about to embark on this process with the community, I think right now, and talk to them about our official community plan and what they want to see and how they want our corridors, our town centers to grow, I expect many of the same discussions that we're having on the table now. Well, that's great, they're going to grow, but how do I move around those places? And how do I connect to those places from where I live or from other town centers? How does it work with public transit? So whether we want to go down the road of an active transportation plan or not, I think people's expectation is when we come and talk to them about land use, we're going to be talking to them about how they move at the same time. So I do think having this opportunity to have those two plans in conjunction with our parks and parks trails and master plan is a great opportunity to come up with a more fulsome document that really guides us the next 25 years. The other point I think I heard in that discussion, I just want to reiterate, we're not putting the pause button on many of the capital projects that come out of these documents today. So whether it's the culture plan, whether it's, as mentioned, the transportation plan, there's a number of active transportation projects in there. People are going to continue to see those projects, and Ms. Fouquet listed some of those. Those are not stopping while we go through this process. This process will be the next generation, and how do we continue? Will we have a good backbone? We know that. How do we build on it? So unless there's any questions on my little summary, I'm just going to pass it over to Ms. Bolfus and we'll go on to the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. So I just wanted to point your attention to a very large pair of binoculars on the table.
We're wondering about it.
It will become apparent at the end. I'm trying not to do a spoiler alert, but it will make sense at the end of our presentation.
It's not to read your PowerPoint.
Well, actually, I was going to note that, like things change and I wear pink now, I do actually need glasses, and I'm trying to deny that fact. So what we've got here is that we've heard that there are 3 key big plans that we're looking at moving forward with as an overall strategic policy review. And what you've got here is a diagram that shows a planning process that all 3 will fit in. In the blue, in the middle stream, you'll see what is basically a fairly standard approach to going through a planning process. So starting off with phase 1, which is research and review. So that is work that has been going on to this date since spring 2019. Some examples are we've initiated a land inventory and capacity analysis. We've also initiated some demographic work. Another also important piece in this starting phase is that as part of the ongoing work of many of our departments like engineering, there's asset management and a whole series of information that doesn't need to be reinvented but will build on and inform all 3 of the plans as we go forward. Then in phase 2, spring of 2020, looking at exploring issues and opportunities. Phase 3, summer of 2020, this is an extremely ambitious and aggressive timeframe. Looking at moving all these 3 plans synergistically together in a year. Drafting the plans, and then reviewing the final stages. So you've got what is a fairly standard 5-phase process that planning processes go through. And what we're showing you here as council in the lime green is where you come in and provide us with guidance, direction, and feedback at different stages. So one of the first key pieces is approving guiding principles that we'll get to a bit later in this presentation, approving in terms of reference that we'll come to you with, and also selecting a task force or committee that would help guide and steer these 3 projects. And then in the orange, a very important piece is where the public can anticipate being involved and the depth of their involvement. And Ms. Kuroki will speak in more detail about how we'll have a comprehensive way of approaching engagement. We know, as Ms. Fipke and Ms. Cole have noted, many of the elements that we need to engage or check in with community on with the official community plan and these plans, all are related. And so to try and attempt to do engagement separately when all these different pieces are connected is both not efficient from engaging our community, and by doing it together, it allows us to be quite holistic in the way we are addressing and working with our community to help them understand where we're at with planning, give them feedback on what we know of the research that we're doing on how effective our plans have been, and to listen to them about what their vision is for the future. So with that, again, this is up for discussion. Council may like to have some comments on the different pieces. And in terms of council's involvement, as I've been mentioned, we'll be coming back to council at different stages of the process, asking council for feedback, letting them know where we're at. And a big piece of council's involvement also comes down to the orange. We know that engagement, community engagement is very important to council. We anticipate that you will be a big part of helping us champion this process and encourage community to be actively involved. And while this is a very key process, we also hope this is a fun community building opportunity as we move through this engagement. And so I'm actually quite looking forward to hearing from Ms. Hiroki as she explains how we can tie all these things together. And before I hand over to her, I just want to say to Ms. Bipke, we are reading a new generation of planner at the city. I think they're called plan engineers. And I include Ms. Coe in that, because parks planners. And so this is something that's a very exciting evolution as we work together in a very integrated way. Okay, so over to Ms. Hiroki.
Thank you. I love that term, plan engineers.
Everyone seems to drop this a little bit. Thank you, Ms. Gopal-Singh, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity for us to come to you and share some of our ideas. You've heard a lot of my colleagues talk about an integrated approach, and what stands out to me is that you're in a very unique position, because not every council has the opportunity to essentially put their stamp on an OCP or a foundational master plan, because they only come up every 10 years or so. And as you all know, Nanaimo is one of Canada's emerging and livable communities, and we've got a population of nearly 100,000. And in 25 years, it's estimated that our population is going to be around 130,000. So again, to my point earlier, you're in a unique position to put your stamp on these foundational master plans and work with the community to help create guidelines and policies and documents that help with current and future planning, address social and environmental well-being, and help the city's operations as you look to build a more resilient community for not just residents, but businesses, students, and visitors alike. And as many of my colleagues here have said, we know that public engagement is very important to you. It helps guide your overall decision-making. So what you hear from, say, 50,000 people, you have to take back and say, okay, how is it going to implement this decision that I make, we as a council make, how is it going to impact the 100,000 or the 130,000 25 years from now? And so this is one of my favorite slides because it talks about some of the approaches that we're going to be taking to doing public engagement. We've got the traditional face-to-face meetings, open houses, but we also want to take them to a different level, using digital engagement as well as using very interesting interactive displays. As you can see here, there's an image of, I think this is Amsterdam, but could be wrong, but either way, the point is that you've got the city on the floor. You've got interactive displays talking about different aspects of the community, demographics, what you like to see and whatnot. And what we're hoping to do with our public engagement consultant that we'll be hiring on to help us execute this is looking for these interactive displays in high traffic areas such as Woodgrove Mall or the Nanaimo Airport, to provide an example. And just anecdotally, I'm trying to figure out how many people use Woodgrove, and I was told around December 1 million people go through Woodgrove Mall. And the idea behind this was from a success story in regards to public engagement that our manager of sanitation and recycling did, Charlotte Davies, where she had a pop-up display in Woodgrove, and the traffic there was phenomenal. They're asking a lot of questions, got a lot of great information, and as exciting as these documents are to our policy wonks, most people don't care. They have absolutely no desire about what's going on unless you make it fun. So we've got some really cool roads that I didn't even know about. So we're going to be using the communication and the marketing of getting people to engage with us in a way to also educate. We're going to use some puns, and we're hiring a creative agency to help us with this, so that we tap into those millennials and those who aren't typically excited learning about, hey, fill out the OCP or water master plan, or looking at things through a green lens, but speaking to them in a way and in a forum or a channel, if it's a better word, than typically done. So we'd like to do advertising in landmark cinemas and using various themes around superheroes. So be a superhero for your community, help change mine and ammo. So there's some certain exciting marketing communications that's going to be coming out that we will come back to you and share with you as we develop them. But you mentioned the importance of engaging with School District 68. I do want to point out that we've started to look at opportunities of how we, what I like to call the push and pull strategy when it comes to public engagement and communication. Many of you here were at the Public Works Day that happened a few months ago. I lost count around, I tried to count, but I think there was about 500 students. Do you guys remember how many students were there?
Yeah, 500.
500. That's 500 students with some of the parents to, I don't remember how many other schools. And so this coming year for 2020, we're going to tap into that network and working with Public Works and all our colleagues here on the integrated approach, educate them on these plans so that they can go back to their parents and say, hey, look at this, they're going to be changing the water supply or something along those lines. They're looking at the water master plan and I flushed a toilet and somehow you need to do this now, just do it. Those kind of conversations, using the little kids to go back to the parents and working with the school district on various other things. The comms team and I were sitting down and looking at local government week. This past year, we had some communication and seeing what does local government do. It was very good to see the amount of engagement, and we realized that not a lot of people understand the role of local government. They know more of obviously the federal government and the province, so we're looking forward to building, as part of our public engagement campaign, using our online platform that I'll talk about, in how do we get people engaged and excited about this is what your local government does, this is how it impacts you every single day. And of course we're going to have roundtables, speaker series, and specific focus groups. Now Ms. Fipke talked about that their team, as well as the traffic team, the traffic planners and engineers meet with, for example, the CNIB, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, to look at their transportation concerns and needs. So we're going to have key focus groups with various individuals throughout the community so that they are in a setting that's comfortable to them, where they feel comfortable sharing about what their needs are on all of these different plans. And we're also going to have wider stakeholder engagement. Now, our engagement objectives are essentially to raise awareness, to help the public understand the significance of these foundational city plans that impacts them and their community on a daily basis. We want to build capacity amongst our citizens by utilizing online engagement as well to reach a demographic that is better representative of Nanaimo's growing diverse community. And for me, and I can speak for all my colleagues here, is we want to create a campaign brand identity that generates excitement and has a sense of community pride, because this place is a spectacular place. I love Nanaimo. I fell in love with it 10 years ago, and I was like, how do I adult? Where do I want to adult? This is it. So for me, it's a dream to be part of this incredible community, working with the incredible people that are sitting at the table, and so I'm honored and look forward to see how we move together in making Nanaimo a resilient and more exciting place. I don't even know if that's possible, but Now, this next slide, I know some of you are going to be so excited and probably have tons of questions, but it's regarding our public engagement tool. Now, we went through a very public process, and there was a representative from the engineering department, the community planning department, communications, and IT. And we unanimously, out of 7 vendors that submitted their application to our RFP, we all went with Bang the Table. Now, interestingly enough, the City of Nanaimo has joined 150 organizations across Canada that are using Bang the Table as their public engagement tool. In BC alone, there's around 32 organizations and growing. And if I can make it more local, on the island, we've got RDN, Comox Regional Valley, City of Parksville, City of Port Alberni, City of Colwood, and Saanich, to name a few, that are using Bang the Table. In fact, RDN and I, your representative of RDN and I have been discussing how we can, we're working on a public engagement framework for the island and how to utilize Bang the Table. So this is a signal to me that we've chosen the right tool. Because going back to my previous comment, we've got a diverse community. We want to make sure that we hear from so many people. Now, as you all know, you've been in different engagement sessions where some people have been very vocal and excited and just out there giving their feedback, and while others don't feel comfortable listening. So they prefer more private or just smaller setting, or they just like to go sit there and then respond to a survey. This online engagement platform allows us to do more. And many of you were part of the public engagement platform, public engagement pilot program that the city embarked on over the previous couple of years. And interestingly enough, when I was analyzing it, I noticed that 3 out of the 4 public engagement sessions had an online component, whether it was surveys or discussions. And so Bang the Table allows us to really engage with the public in a different way. Now, I want to bring your attention to the light bulb. That's the ideas feature. So instead of doing a quick poll, we're trying to see, zone A and zone B, turn it into, do you want to see a park or do you want to see a town square? Instead of using a poll, which would traditionally be used, we can use the ideas feature to make it more engaging and have like a rendering or something along those lines. We want to get dialogue going among especially those people who come to meetings but don't feel comfortable enough by using the discussion forum. And we've got opportunities where we can use guest books, where people can provide comments and we'll respond back to them, and they're moderated to allow respectful dialogue among people with different opinions. So this is a high overview of what Bang the Table does, and I'm looking forward to coming back to you in the coming weeks as we're meeting with Bang the Table in regards to implementing this platform and what it will look like, how we're going to be using these tools specifically to Nanaimo. Now, if you remember, before I started in April, Ms. Gurry did a presentation to the council, the GPC meeting, regarding council committee meetings and engagement. And there's 2 things that I'd like to refresh your memory on. One is that we're going to get a public engagement platform. 2, everything that the city does engages with the public using IAP2 Spectrum. IAP2 is the International Association of Public Participation. It's an international leader in public participation with a mission to provide practitioners, planners, communicators with the tool sets to really help engage with the public. So as you see here, there's 5 different spectrums: inform, consult, involve, collaborate, empower. I know many of you are familiar with this, but for those who are not, anything from the left, as you move to the right, there's more public participation in it. Now, for a majority of what we're going to be doing is we're going to be in the Inform, Consult, Involve, Collaborate columns. And the Citizen Advisory Task Force is going to be co-empowering. So whatever they provide to council, you'll be, whether you approve their recommendations or not, at the end of the day, you have the final stamp of approval on these plans, but the steering committee, the task force will be helping steer these plans along. Now, I just want you to take a moment and look at this image and the icons we've used. Why are we doing this? We have a population that has gone from, I've heard some people say, Nanaimo is, used to be 80,000, now we're at 90, but we're at 98,500. In 25 years, we're going to be at 130,000. We're engaging the youth from school age to university students to those who are ready to retire or retired or working professionals. And so the purpose of all of this, why we're here today, providing you this framework and helping provide you an idea of where we're going with this whole process, is that because we want conversations to happen. Whether it's online or whether people attending an information meeting, they're sitting there, they've got their, whether they like to use paper or technology, talking about important things that are that matter to them. So with that, I'm open to questions, comments if you have.
Thank you. Any questions, Director Councilor Hammond?
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Verocchi. You just, one slide ago, mentioned council's involvement with the task force. Is that reference to the previous task force, or are you imagining a new task force will start?
It's it's the task force that's referred to in this, it's a citizen advisory group for the 2020 strategic policy. For this process, the city master plan.
Okay. And I just, as a previous member of the community engagement task force that created recommendations to council, I just want to compliment your work on integrating the community engagement opportunities, because that was one of the priority recommendations from that task force, to say that there's often lots of opportunities, but they're disparate. And so if we have one really great, maybe full day event where you can comment on engineering, comment on planning, comment on transportation, that might be a more proactive and effective way to kind of get those ideas from the community. So thank you.
Councilor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad we actually chose this platform. That was one of my favorites. My question to you is, what outcomes will we be seeing that will show that the implementation of this thing has been a success?
It's a really good question, because metrics is big for me. Data is big for me. And so one of the things that I really appreciate about this platform that I didn't see as well provided in some of the others was the analytics. So we know that, as I mentioned earlier, some people are policy wonks or really excited to get involved in their community because they love giving back to their community, and this is how getting involved in these kind of public engagement opportunities is their thing. So, but then there are those who just, what is this about? They will go and read about all the things that we're trying to do, saving the date to come engage, and they're fine with it. They'll decide 4 years, 3.5 years from now on E-Day. But then there's others who will go and be like, oh, I really want to put my name, subscribe, and be notified for surveys, newsletters that come out of here. I'm going to put this in my calendar. I'm going to jump in there and discuss. So then they fall into the collaborative and consult phase, and then we can see the data, how many people are engaging online. So that will help with the overall public engagement strategy, because We're also going to be counting the face-to-face stuff. You know, I mentioned that at the public works day, there was 500 students that were involved, that were there. And so how do we tap into that network and increase it? So we're going to be looking at data. We're going to be looking at online language, and we're utilizing a few hashtags as part of like the, I don't know if you're familiar with, but hashtag marketing, so that we can track and see the dialogue that's happening. And we're going to get the support of our public engagement consultant and our creative brand marketing firm to help us with that, because we don't have a platform that allows us to capture such data. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Do you have a launch date?
In November for everything, because as you know, by the end of next week, the writ's going to drop for the federal election. Anything we try to do prior to that is just going to be swallowed up by the federal election. And we also touched on engagement fatigue and information overload. So November is a good time, because after October 21st, give them a couple of weeks of reprieve before we go out and start saying, hey, save the date, we're going to come to you with these engagement dates in February, mid-January, and so forth, because we're aiming for the first couple of weeks of November, because after that, as you know, it's Black Friday, then Cyber Monday, and it's Christmas. It's already Christmas in Costco. And a first for me, Halloween and Christmas, so I'm not sure what to get. I'm a little excited to do both, but yeah, so we're looking at a save the date. We're going to be doing public engagement in November, really pushing our new public engagement platform, and then like going hot at it at the beginning of the new year.
Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Faroki. Just quickly following up on your comment about metrics, that interests me. And maybe you don't know at this point, but how detailed will you be able to track the engagement results that we receive back? I guess I'm thinking more online, but actually the face-to-face and the other open houses and so on. Number of people, number of different people, what's the word I should use instead of different, I'm not sure, but you know what I mean?
I understand.
Age, demographics, and so on. Will that be fairly detailed? I think that would be very interesting.
Yes, so through the online platform, there's different ways where we can capture that data. As for the face-to-face online, I think Ms. Fipke mentioned the challenges with collecting that data with the active transportation side of things. However, because if we're going to be doing face-to-face, we can have counters there. We can have special sign-up sheets as well to ask the public, for that information, knowing full well that some may not feel comfortable, and being mindful of that. So we're going to do whatever we can from having counters at these engagement face-to-face ones, we'll say, so that we can capture those audiences. And of course, when we have our focus groups, as we work with the associations and whatnot who bring those key people to the table, those will be hard numbers that we can easily track, because it's not going to be an inflow of people coming in and out. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head too when you said that a lot of people just aren't interested. Absolutely no doubt. We take a look at when we did our strategic plan, we had 60 people, Parksville had 900. So it's quite interesting to see. But I think the other issue that I hear is the time we set these up. Like 6 o'clock on a Thursday, a lot of people don't want to go that. I think the other thing I think that we're missing that I think would be valuable is if we hit some of the groups up, like your Provis groups that have 200-300 people there that would love to have you there as a guest speaker, or your Rotaries. I think we're missing the boat on a lot of that, where we think if we set something up at Bev and people are going to come. I've been to one where there was only 3 people all night. So I think your ideas are really great. I think it's awesome, and I really hope that we get more buy-in from it. But normally people don't react unless it's, their garbage wasn't picked up and we get how many emails on it, until it personally impacts them. So.
Well, maybe we'll use that as a strategy. Garbage picked up, fill out the survey.
But you would get it, it's going to affect them, or they're not
Right on the list.
If I
want
may,
the taxes to go up.
but if I may jump in and answer a comment that you made about tying into other groups. We had, I think it was July, Mr. Lindsay, if you can refresh my memory, we had pretty large meeting in this room where we had various stakeholders that are involved in all this, these different master plans, and talked about what are you doing next year from an event standpoint that we can collaborate in? Who are you meeting with? Can we have a place, for example, a booth in the farmer's market? Who's meeting? There was a, I forget the name, I'm so sorry, but this individual was meeting with people who were in wheelchairs and walking them through their various public engagement opportunities. And so we're working on that, and I have started a calendar, very high level calendar, and looking at, plugging in local government week, all these other things that tie into it, into how we can potentially communicate and when we can communicate what the opportunities are. Does that answer your question?
Yep, that's great.
And we'll be coming back to you with these, the public engagement strategy, and as well as the online public engagement platform. How it's going to work.
Councilman Walker?
Thank you, Chair. And one more question, if I may. In terms of signing up, when I was doing research for this a long time ago, I joined, I think it was Kamloops, who used Bank Table as well. And I was able to sign up quite easily, just gave my postal code and obviously wasn't there. Is this the way that we'll be doing it with this one, is people just sign up on their own? Will we be taking, I know we have a very large newsletter distribution list. Will we sign those up, people, and tell them we signed them up?
One would wish, but due to CASL rules, so that's email marketing, we are prohibited to do that. That's why we're going to be spending a significant amount of dollars towards marketing, tapping into our current networks that are helping us through this engagement process and notifying them in that form. And the other piece is you, all of you. You are our ambassadors for this engagement. I know. I saw those eyebrows go up and down. It's very exciting, but it's true. So with your support, as you meet with your various groups and members, I have an idea of, we're in the process of taking your business cards. In the back, there's Precious Marketing Real Estate, and we're going to be putting some information as to the ways that you can connect with the city. And one of them is going to be a link to our public engagement tool. So once we have all the information that we need, you'll be getting those cards as well. So as you meet with people, they're like, hey, by the way, connect with us. This is how you want to know what's happening in the city. Here you go. There's some
follow-up. Quick little one again. Again, it's on the process. I'm also signed up with the RDN, but I cannot remember the last time I got an email from the RDN saying there's a conversation happening on Bank Table or something like that. So are we going to be actively, once people are signed up, actively pushing things to them?
Absolutely. So I can't speak for the RDN because I don't know what projects they're really working on, what phase, but ours is going to be a 2-year process, and we're going to have regular touch points because, as Mr. Lindsay had said earlier, these 3 master... I thought it was a
fire alarm.
What's wrong? Let me go back to this slide. As Mr. Lindsay mentioned, it's not just the OCP and the Parks and Recreation Culture Master Plan or the Active Sustainable Transportation Plan. We've got additional plans, the Community Sustainability Action Plan, the Economic Development Strategy, the Water Supply Strategic Plan. So we're going to have a lot of opportunities to have touch points with the community. Hey, did you know? We want to hear from you if you want. And so all of this comes down to what the teams are ready to communicate, where they're at in getting the engagement side of things from the community, whether they want them to be consulting right now or collaborating with us, or how does that work. So certainly this is going to be a platform that's going to be used quite significantly over the next 2 years at least.
Great.
I think,
Councilor Martin.
thank you through the chair. I think Councillor Bonner actually asked a question, but anybody who we had the email on file, we would be able to send them an invite to it.
This is a great question for our Director of Legislative Services, Sheila Gurry.
Thank you, Chair, through you to Councillor Martin. Unfortunately, no.
Not even an invite, no?
No, a personal email can only be used for the purposes it was collected for in the first place. So it can't be used to advertise or invite or spam under not only CASL, but under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So an email is personal information, and we're only allowed to use it for the purposes that we collected it.
For those of us that are, like, I'm signed up to in the city and I get the emails because I've asked to know when all meetings are, etc. We don't do a monthly newsletter.
We
do a weekly one.
We just started Mine Nanaimo.
Yes.
So anybody who signs up to say, yes, I want to be on Mine Nanaimo, obviously that information will be there.
So anybody that has currently signed up for it now will get that information that they've asked for now, but anything else we want to invite them to, they would have to sign up again.
Okay.
So that's because we cannot go out and advertise or invite using personal information that we've collected from them. They've consented to giving it to us for a purpose other than what we're doing now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Brown? Yeah, just building on that, I was just curious, can we send notice out with like tax bills or utility notices?
We will be doing that, absolutely, yes. We're looking at our, just to, if I may expand on that, we've identified a couple of internal communication opportunities where we're sending the public information out, like the tax notice, and certainly we can take advantage of that. Because we already have a newsletter that goes out to the public.
Great, yeah, I have just a few comments. I'm very heartened that we have our communications manager and communications strategy that's starting to be developed. It's really wonderful to hear, and also the creative approach of getting the message out about what the city's up to. And I think this OCP and planning update is such a wonderful opportunity to really develop our capabilities. I had one question just regarding Bang the Table and integration with the council meetings. Is that something that we'd look at happening for the community? We have every 2 weeks, every twice a year we have a town hall. That's the word.
Certainly we'll be utilizing Bang the Table for the e-town halls. And as the e-town halls, previously we used Facebook and social and Twitter to garner the questions. We're certainly going to use social media to get people aware that there is an e-town hall, but drive the conversation online to Bang the Table. And what another point about Bang the Table I would make that I didn't make was that for anyone who's not on social media, but has access to an email, meaning that they have access to the internet and they can go onto the website, it's a great platform to engage those people as well. So.
Great. Yeah, no, I really appreciate identifying all these potential lines of getting communication, and just finally, with the amount of misinformation that is out there online, and it is a battle communicating, and I heard a great suggestion from a community member about having, a goal for our communication strategy of having the most informed electorate in Canada. And I think that would really give us a lot of strength as a community to move forward and do some daring and innovative projects that are going to help us, build a more sustainable and vibrant community. So, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I'm just going to pass it on to Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're getting near the end of our presentation. But as I mentioned earlier on, one of the things we want council to have some input and discussion around is some guiding principles as we start to embark on this. So I'm just going to hand it over to Ms. Opalsing just to walk you through the last slide here.
you. So what you see before you is again a collaborative effort. In fact, I went away on holiday and this was created, so. What you've got is some draft principles that staff have taken the feedback they've gotten through council on a variety of fronts, and this is up for discussion. These are draft guiding principles for all the different strategic policy documents, with the idea that with each specific plan, whether it's the official community plan or the Parks and Rec master plan, there'd be more detailed put into those. So what we've got here is build on successful policies of existing documents, incorporate council's strategic themes as identified in the strategic plan, acknowledge the priorities of climate change, reconciliation, and sustainable service delivery, include robust community engagement in the creation of plans and strategies, and provide a clear and coordinated vision to guide the community building for the next 25 years. So as I said again, these are the overall themes for the strategic policy. With these are draft up for council to discuss and let us know if staff are on the right track with these. With the knowledge that with each individual plan, there'll be more definition given that's customized to whether it's the OCP, Parks and Rec, or the active transportation plan. So,
Councillor Hammonds?
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Pulsing, I think they're great. I was really heartened to see the emphasis on community engagement. My only question potentially missing is measurement and ensuring that when we create plans, we are very clear about how we're going to measure our success and when we're going to do that.
but that's definitely something that, sorry, through the chair, Councillor Hammonds, that's definitely something that we can add in, and also that has actually come up for discussion. This is something that those of you who are directors with the RDN know that with the RGS, measuring and tracking and reporting on progress so that we can adjust and see whether our policy has been a big part of the regional growth strategy, and it's something that we've looked at with our official community plan. I think the measures that you discussed with Ms. Vipke and some of the things they're tracking with per capita bike lanes, it's like, what is that SMART goals approach, right? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? All those pieces. So I think we can come up with some wording that addresses that if that's what the council would like to see.
Just a note on process. We'll take more questions, and there are recommendations, and if we do want to make amendments, what we'll do is we'll have an initial discussion, and then if recommendations are being made, we'll do motions around them, around the discussion. So questions for Ms. Pulsing. I've got Councillor Brown, or Councillor Martin, Councillor Brown, and Councillor Turvey.
I think prior,
Sorry, Councillor Martin.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Through the chair. Under the options for, and I actually like all of the strategies, or the guiding principles, I guess is what they're called. And I agree we should incorporate that we have SMART goals and that it's measurable. But it starts with FGH. Where's A, B, C, D, E? Or did I miss something, or? I'm on page 13.
Oh, on the staff report. I beg your pardon, I don't have it right in front of me.
Yeah, so I was like, well, page 13. What's it in my iPad? I don't know, it's at the beginning, where it's at the recommendation.
I thought it was here.
It's pure typo error.
Oh, is it pure typo?
CDB on mine.
Oh, okay, because I was confused by going, what are the other guiding principles? So these really should just be like A, B, C, D.
Yes, I think it's probably a function of the bullets.
Okay, thank you.
I've seen if you read it.
Oh, I see.
That's all I had.
Option one.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
yeah, I like the guiding principles. I definitely think it's a great idea to, whoever said last, to package all these projects together and do one great engagement strategy and piece, because as Mr. Lynch and also your worship kind of highlighted, a lot of these plans are deeply integrated and important. With the guiding principles, just acknowledge the priorities of climate change, reconciliation, sustainable service delivery. I do think words matter, and because I acknowledge that I shouldn't eat a family-sized bag of Miss Vicky's potato chips every Monday night after council meetings, it doesn't stop me from doing it. So,
It says acknowledge and address.
does it say acknowledge and address?
Yeah, or mine does.
Mine says acknowledge the priorities.
Mine says-
Knowledge.
Yeah, so I like acknowledge and address.
Oh,
I just had one question.
No, it's in the green sheet, it's not that one.
One question is, with respect to, at some point, there will be in-stream OCP applications that maybe don't start to correspond with the new draft OCP. How will that be handled? And cognizant of that, there's expectations of the community and also expectations of the development community.
Through the chair to Councillor Brown, that's an excellent question and one that we hope to come back to council with, because come at our next intake OCP amendment applications is in November. And so getting some guidance from council on how they would like to address that is pretty key. There's pros and cons to either approach. One is to look at applications in light of the research and the recommendations for going forward, or to put a moratorium on applications, which of course is not ideal from the perspective of the development community. So this is something I anticipate that we would be sitting down further on, or we could even have discussion on now. I might actually defer a little bit to Mr. Lindsay and also to Mr. Rudolph. And actually, before I do, I actually wanted to say that with regard to the idea of collaborating on all these different plans, we have a senior leadership team with Mr. Rudolph, Mr. Harding, Mr. Sims, and Mr. Lindsay, who have all helped frame up a lot of the work that you see before you. There are eyes and ears on the ground in terms of impacting the council, and so I just wanted to say that while I might stand up here and present things, it's, again, a force behind me. So with that, I'm wondering if Mr. Lindsay, you've got any comments on, in fact, I'd like to, curious about the last OCP review and how that was addressed. Because different municipalities do things in different ways, and so you'll be aware and still relatively municipal.
Your worship, or sorry, the chair, your question regarding putting a pause on applications, and I would say that has been the past practice when we've gone through comprehensive OCP reviews. To say we're not going to look at official community plan amendments, and this time we're going to focus on our plan. I'm a little bit nervous about recommending at this time the council do that, because I think the minute you drop a marker like that, sometimes an application comes forward that you actually want to entertain. And I think fettering your discretion in that way is not always the best approach. I think you still have the opportunity to look at an application and say, yes, we think this meets the intent of where we want to go, it meets a lot of our priorities. You also have the opportunity to look at an application that comes in the door and says, you know what, let's just put a pause on that one right now until we get through this review process. So I'd rather leave that discretion to council on a case-by-case basis. The other part that I guess I'd want to think about and maybe be mindful of is, we have an OCP that has some pretty good bones. We know where our town centers are. We know what Nanaimo looks like. It's a linear community. We know how the centers are connected. We're now just, and I think the last time we reported on, and Ms. Wolfelsing referred to, we are just starting to see some infill in our town centers. I'm not anticipating we're going to go through an OCP and have a complete redo where town centers are gone and we're going to be introducing agriculture around the hospital or anything like that. These bones are going to be there. So for that reason, I think we still have the ability to go ahead and look at individual applications, but withhold that ability at the end of the day to put a pause on anything that makes you question or uncomfortable.
Just quickly with respect to my first comment, Councillor Armstrong and Marvin showed that it says address and acknowledge within the recommendation. It's just the graphic that is. Sorry.
you need to
Chair,
address
I meant to note that also. I apologize for the typo. We were working on those at the last minute, and we specifically had that internal discussion about the importance of saying address. So the wording in your report and the motion just does say both acknowledge and address the priorities in climate change reconciliation and sustainable service.
Okay, great. So I have Shirley Armstrong for. Did you have a question? Shirley?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Here you go.
So I guess the question I have is the definition of building on successful policies, given that the OCP was developed a number of years ago. I can see potentially a conflict coming down where are in need of, for climate change reasons and sustainable service delivery, needing to do infill. And there are areas of the city that are specified in the original OCP as single-family dwellings. Do we consider then that to be not a successful policy, given the changes that we have to look at? I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Shirley. So one of the things that's going to help us evaluate whether policies have been successful enough or not, and then in light of what we were trying to do in the past and in terms of the future, is some of the studies, including our land capacity analysis, which will be taking stock and inventory what proportion of the city's land and different designations has been maximized, what still has the potential for both infill, redevelopment, and also new development, and evaluating how well that will match the demands that we foresee for single family, for commercial, for industrial, as we know, take into consideration what we forecast that demand will be. So we don't have the results of that study yet. It's just in its beginning stages. We hope to have the initial results, I would say by December is fairly ambitious, but maybe January in time for the next stages. And I hope that that will help us understand that question.
Councillor Armstrong.
Building on what Councillor Hammond said, I would like us, if we go ahead, is to add an act which is include an evaluation and or measurement process. I think it's really important that that's there. I agree 100% with what she says. I think, it's very hard for us to say without that there, was it successful or not. We learn more from failures and successes too, so I think it's really important to have that piece in there. So I would like to add after people are in agreement.
So I would ask if we could, in the ensuing conversation, we'll take some more questions and discuss, but if that could be written into, a motion for recommendation.
Yeah, didn't want to do that until we
next.
had discussion.
Yes, excellent.
Then I can do it after.
So yeah, great. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Hopewell Singh. Thanks to staff. I fully support the guiding principles there, and I appreciate the work and the thought that's gone into them. My only question is related to the bottom statement and the time frame of 25 years. And I'm a firm believer in long-term planning and visioning, but given how quickly our city is changing, and given that an official community plan usually has a life of 10 to 15 years, is it realistic to say that we can provide a vision out 25 years? Could you just comment on that, please?
Yes. So with regard to OCPs, in the Local Government Act, it's not actually required that you review it every 10 years, but it's best practice, and so most do. Now, you'll know that some municipalities, even when they're doing their plans, they have them actually out as even as far as 100 years, right? Really looking out with a sustainability lens, some even 50. So 25 is still a pretty modest. It doesn't mean that we won't review every 5, 10 years. But what it does mean is that we're really looking quite far out at what the potential implications are of climate change, adaptation, demographic changes. And so I guess from my professional standpoint, we still want to aim for that longer term piece, knowing that we will come back every 10 years and reevaluate. Has our population grown in the way we thought it would? So it's now 2019. Once we do our forecast, has our industrial land been absorbed in the way we anticipated in 10 years' time? And then we come back and we do a refresh. And back in when with even Imagine Nanaimo and then Plan Nanaimo in 1996, and then the 2008 review, the city was looking beyond 10 years in the planning and the scope. And I think it speaks to perhaps what Mr. Lindsay was, actually it speaks directly to what Mr. Lindsay was saying about how some of the policies around the growth of corridors and roads are now beginning to take shape. Sometimes when we vision things, it takes time for our community and the funding and the economics and developers for things to start shape. So we're really starting to see the evolution of a high degree of development along our corridors and building out those complete compact communities that we're wanting to see happen. And I would say if we had planned back in 1996 and even 2008 on a shorter time frame, we might have switched policies before we'd given them a chance to really evolve and grow. So I'm not sure if Mr. Lindsay or anybody else has any comments along that, but professionally, I'd say even 25 years is short, that even longer, but that doesn't mean you don't do what Councillor Hammond said. You measure and you evaluate, and then you come back to see what you need to adjust within that course.
Thank you. No, that certainly makes sense. Thanks.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Mr. Singh. This may be my misunderstanding of how the whole process works, but it's my understanding we're doing an OCP review and we're including all of these other plans in that review. Are we creating an omnibus OCP that all these other plans are part of it and they are now too involved to be changed? Or would the process be is to do the OCP, look at the land review, and then reference these other policies around it so that they're more flexible in changing them? Or is this 6 of one, half a dozen of the other?
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner, it is a little bit of the latter, but the key part is that we're moving in sync. So the feedback on the active transportation, for example, feeds directly into the OCP, the Parks and Rec Master Plan the same. So we're attempting to do things all together rather than having the OCP hold up the other two processes. So we're attempting to streamline them together, knowing that each will inform the OCP, and the OCP going forward will drive the overall direction. So there's a consistency back and forth between the official community plan. I think when we were looking at what to call this process, there were different things thrown out. OCP Plus was one, Vision 2020, like how to capture that process. I think Mr. Rudolph had a good experience in Abbotsford of how they managed to synergistically have the official community plan dovetail with a range of other plans. In our case, because there's a need to do several at once, we're going to channel all three in a year. So it's extremely ambitious, a bit experimental for the way we've done things previously. So I feel pretty confident in the direction that we're going and that it will all make sense. And for the community, when they give feedback, and I think this speaks to perhaps what Ms. Brokey was talking about, when you ask them about their feelings around how they want to see their community grow, how they want to walk around their community, how they want to interact, they're not thinking about the Parks and Rec Master Plan or the official community plan. We're asking them to give feedback on these border categories that we will then take to see if our existing policies work in that fashion or make recommendations to change it. So I'm not sure I fully answered your question, but
Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you. This is more of just a general question, but it ties into this. This is obviously, like you said, a hugely ambitious thing. I'm just wondering, around capacity-wise, when we have other important things like the Health and Housing Task Force and that work and going through those plans and hopefully implementing those plans and some other big projects, is this going to, long-term planning is important, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan, but I'm just wondering about these really near-term things that are highly important for people living here today, and is this going to impact our ability to do that work?
okay, through the chair to Councillor Brown, excellent question. The answer is no, it won't, because I think if our team, community planning, was undertaking this on their own in isolation, yes, maybe. But we have, as I said, a force behind us. We also have the pooled resources for engagement, taking the budgets from different plans to do things more efficiently. And so I'm confident with the resources we have on staff and resources that council has given us to budget for consultants, that we will be able to achieve this.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. Along similar lines, and I think you almost just answered it right there, is do you need any more resources from us? Are we going to be seeing something coming through the next budget to help you out with this?
Well, I think that right now we have the budget to launch this. And as we go, if we find that we are short or we're wanting to do more or the engagement is costing us more than we anticipate, we will come back to council. But as I said, part of the strategic aspect of this is the efficiencies that this process is bringing, particularly around the engagement side. That's typically one of the more heavy resource investment in terms of both time and money. And so I anticipate that through this interdepartmental collaboration, we're actually going to see some efficiencies that put us in a good position.
To the chair, can I just, further Councillor Bonner's question, I just want to confirm, there are monies for these various planning documents, including the OCP, that have been in previous budgets, and we've been carrying over, preparing ourselves for this. But when it comes time for council to receive and deliberate on the 2020 budget, there will be additional funding requests at that time. So there will be additional money for the official community plan and the active transportation plan, and also some money for the Parks and Rec culture to allow them to be fully funded. So you will see those requests.
I have a comment. Just in terms of the climate emergency declaration and the acknowledgement and addressing of climate change, I know I brought this up in the past about the Community Sustainability Action Plan. And my interpretation is within that plan, it basically articulates the targets that we need to meet in various, within housing efficiency, transportation, in order to meet our contribution to the IPCC targets, which have now been revamped for if we want to keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees. I know there's been some discussion of baking this all into the OCP, which I think is a wonderful thing. However, I'm concerned that the updating of the targets and the review of the Community Sustainability Action Plan, I'm just curious, is that going to line up so that we have these targets so that when we go to the community, we can inform them that a large part of how we're trying to design our city and the direction we're going is so that we can meet these targets to basically do our part to build a more sustainable community. So I do have some concerns or just maybe a lack of understanding of the process that we foresee of how we're going to get those targets to inform how we're going to set up our OCP and Transportation Master Plan and what we're striving for.
Chair, maybe I can start, maybe also you can jump in. So we didn't spend a lot of time on it today, but certainly in the staff report, there is a mention of council's direction on updating the Community Sustainability Action Plan. And again, when you receive your 2020 budget, there is a request in the funding to support that work. So it's critical. There's, I guess, 2 different points I want to touch on. One is if you set aside the targets, the GHG reduction targets for a minute, and look at the existing Sustainability Action Plan, in my opinion, it largely takes our policies from our official community plan and our transportation master plan and puts them in a separate document on the shelf. I think you have an opportunity, if it's that critical to council, that the message is this is fundamental to everything we believe in, it shouldn't be in a separate document, it should be in the official community plan, and that's why we've included it as a guiding principle here. We do have the money set aside, though, to do that work. As you know, or you may be aware, the province in the past has provided a lot of the community GHG generation numbers, so we're going to continue to work with them to see what we can gather, but you're absolutely correct, getting that information, getting that data, and also the work, Ms. Bopals, you mentioned the work we're doing right now on climate resiliency and response, all of that is going to be key to moving forward in how we do land use planning and transportation planning.
So just a point of clarity. So in this OCP process, there will be a section where we, either a consultant or whatever, there'll be work done to look at those targets to see, how does that fit in with our planning process.
Yeah, absolutely. Our intent is to make sure that, again, that is integrated with this overall process.
Great, thank you.
And to follow up, there is already work underway that syncs nicely with this, and that's the climate adaptation planning that's being undertaken by Mr. Lawrence under the community development section. So results of that are due in full, and that will be a critical piece in addressing some of the concerns or issues you raised.
Is there any more questions, discussion from council? Yeah, I'd be open to one motion regarding the recommendations and any possible amendments.
I'd like to make an amendment and add, if people are in agreement, that we add bullet 7
So
to.
just as a point of procedure, should we make the motion to remove the recommendations and then go ahead to the,
Thank you, Chair. So what Councillor Armstrong could do is move the motion with the following change, and she could add number F, and whatever wording she has, I had some as well, and you could move it together and not have to amend.
excellent. Always want to follow the proper procedure.
So I'd like to move the recommendation and add bullet F, which would say to include an evaluation, which would include a measurement and outcome process.
Seconded by Councillor Martin. Discussion.
Can we just get that one more time?
To include an evaluation process, which would include a measurement and an outcome process. Measurement and outcomes. Like you do an evaluation including.
Would you wish to speak to your amendment?
No, I just agree with what Councillor Hammond said earlier. Like, I think it's really important that we know, did it work or didn't it work? Like, without that, to me, plans are irrelevant if you don't have some way to look at the outcomes.
Councillor Mott?
I'm slightly confused. I think the second part makes sense, an evaluation process, but I don't know about the first part to, what is it, to set up?
No, it said to include an evaluation process,
Yeah.
which would look at which you would have the measurement and outcomes. You could just use evaluation process, but normally it says which includes a measurement and outcomes. But Sheila's got that, Ms. Curry's got
Yeah, Ms. Curry?
Thank you. If Councillor Armstrong, this is what I have, if Council would prefer, is F, provide a method that allows for the evaluation and measurement of the plans and strategies.
Works for me.
A second Ms. Curry's motion.
I'm willing to amend mine to that.
Okay.
I'm willing, yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. I should have asked her to begin with.
I have a question to staff. What are your thoughts on that amendment and the necessity, and does that add to something that's already been done or provide focus on it? Just some background on your thoughts.
Again, this is exactly the kind of discussion we're hoping for. It's something that's critical and important to council that I would say is universal to all the work we're going to do. This is the appropriate place to put it. We are going to have further opportunity to come back to you and talk to you about each plan in terms of reference for each, and there'll be further guiding principles that you might focus on each plan that are unique to those plans. But I would see this as something that you would expect to see overall, applied to all of the plans. If that's the case, I think this is the appropriate place for it.
And so on evaluation and outcomes, in terms of a guiding principle, is that something that it will provide added focus to ensure that that aspect of it is done?
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. I think that's important. That we're thinking about it as we develop those plans, and at the end of the day, when we bring those back and introduce those to council, we'll have that in mind, able to ask ourselves whether we're meeting that test. I appreciate that.
Great. Any other discussion?
I have a question.
No. Dr. Bonner.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Out of the conversation that we've had today, I'm feeling much better in that the work of our existing plans will continue on. I think that was critical. I just didn't see it when I first read through this whole thing. So I'm happy with that, and knowing that that's going to take place. So I will vote in favor of the motion as it sits.
Great. Well, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion with the recommendation or the amendment? Motion carried. So, the next portion of the agenda, which is a recurring item,
agenda planning.
Okay, Chair, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
There's
I
just
missed
one
that.
more, there's one more little treat for you before.
Hold that binocular close by.
There's no chocolate, I'm sorry. So
He likes buttered hearts.
what we're going to show you today, and you have the binoculars on your table, we have a very creative team of people. So Mr. Corson came up with the idea of having us create a video. And so you will see what in-house can do at very short notice. So credits to Mr. Johnson for pulling this together, and for members of my team, Madeline Coe. So I hope you enjoy.
Very good.
So I just want to say, we have also Amber Manhas here, and again, that integrated piece. And Mr. Schulberg came up with the idea. He's got the binoculars that you see on the table, those are his binoculars. And I think this is a way of showing the opportunity and the creativity we have in-house to really have a fun and dynamic engagement. And they say, what, 90% of all communication is nonverbal. Wasn't a word spoken there.
Thank you very much for that. What a wonderful vibe that puts out about the community. And, great to see that creativity. So on to the next section here for agenda planning. Current item. We have the schedule of some suggested topics.
Mr. Chair, just wanted to confirm our next GPC, scheduled GPC meetings, well, we had a special one, I think at our last meeting, but I understand some of you may not be available on that date, the 30th, so I just wanted to confirm your availability for that day. So if you're not all available, do you want to move that back to 1 week to the 7th? So that's one question. But that is our current schedule of GPC meetings that we've identified topics for the remainder of the year. So just the one question around 30th. It's good.
So is there any issue for people on the 30th? I know that it's an important discussion that day.
Yes, it is.
Ideally with all councils present.
Councilor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. It's a date that I will have to check availability on. We have a family event happening that week, and I'm not exactly sure if I'm available or not. So I will find out as quickly as I can. I would also note that other councillors will just be returning from UBCM the day before. I don't know if that impacts anybody.
It's a Monday.
It's only Vancouver.
What's 15 minutes?
So we'll keep it there for now, and if we can revisit this maybe next week, council meetings. It doesn't really, we can make either work at the staff level for you, so just was trying to take advantage of that extra day, which we didn't have previously scheduled. So if there's a concern around that, we'll probably need to confirm that by next week. If we're going to carry forward with that date or not. And that's it on this.
Okay, is there any items or thoughts, discussion around this that council would like to add about potential topics?
So as a council is aware, we have this as a placeholder, as a place that we may start to build agendas from for topics. There's going to be a lot coming out of the work program you just presented over the next 2 years. I want to congratulate staff for the work they're doing and the enthusiasm that we're heading into this, because you really have to hit the ground running. There will be a lot more information coming your way, so we're going to need all these dates in the future. A lot of extra time. So but you're right, the next meeting is rather important because we're going to revisit the subject of our procedure bylaw and committees and all the public engagement initiatives that are underway. Let's get back into council's question earlier about capacity, because we are in the process of launching quite a few task forces. We have the Health and Housing Task Force, the Economic Development Group that's going through the review process, the OCP Steering Committee, and of course the launch of the Environment Committee. And I know there's an appetite, I think, in terms of accessibility and some of those other topics that we'd like to bring back to you and talk to you about, making sure that we're covering all the bases. So that will be at the next meeting. So there's a lot of balls going to be in the air, and they're all big, starting soon. So today was just kind of a laying the groundwork day for you.
Great. Councilor Armstrong.
One thing I was thinking about recently, because we're getting a lot more FOI requests, again, if we go over a process of how maybe we can set it up on a computer for storage, which would make it easier for and have council understand what could be important, that this probably will be an FOI-able topic. Like, I would like to see more around that. I know that people have come out and said, well, what's the process for this, what's the process for that? So I think it is not urgent, but I do think WIPA is really important from our perspective, like, even when it comes to committees, if you've made notes on individuals, you need to keep them, because they may,
Perhaps that could be part of the conversation at the governance day.
the chairman.
Yeah.
I just think it's important, because I don't think everybody really has a really good grasp of what you need to keep and not keep, and how to keep.
Thank you. Councilor Hammonds?
Thank you, Chair. I apologize if I missed this when I stepped out, but you mentioned the OCP Steering Committee. Will council sit on that, or some members?
Mr. Lindsay mentioned that we need to come back to establish in terms of reference a composition for an overarching steering committee, which is a normal thing for an OCP or strategic planning initiative. So that's a conversation that you need to have in terms of its composition, which counselor, how many counselors, and so forth. But it's something delegated responsibility for those folks to come back and make recommendations. So there will be a report coming on that issue the next month, within the next few weeks for sure.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Through you to Mr. Rudolph or Ms. Geary. I'm just curious if on the 19th, I think there's the expectation of a report around the youth engagement committee, and I'm just wondering if that was coming up at any point.
Thank you, Chair, through you to Councilor Brown. Yes, the Youth Advisory Committee was still not dealt with, and that was planning to come with the rest of the committee and engagement and procedure bylaw process. And the reason it ties into engagement, and it would possibly be tying into the accessibility component, is to have something not unlike the intersectional urbanism that you brought up earlier.
Don't bring it up.
Yeah,
Just a better
so
name.
something about that,
Inclusion.
the inclusion, where the accessibility and inclusion committee that might possibly come would include youth. So it's those underrepresented individuals that are often not engaged with or not sought their opinions as much as they should. That would be kind of included in that committee. Because with the current youth advisory committee that we had and that has been on hold, there was a committee, like we talked about before, is quite, it's an old-fashioned type way of engagement, and youth and that committee didn't really gel that well together. So some other format to get them more involved and access their enthusiasm that they have on a lot of different matters, I think would be better suited in that committee. So yes, it will come.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. And this isn't me just trying to fill an empty space here, but I know we talked about transportation in April, but it was more like a presentation. We're just kind of listening to what was going on. I wonder if it's worth having another conversation about that, specifically more about with active transportation in all its forms, with the idea of maybe trying to look at leveling the playing field between us and them, car folks and everybody else, so with all, just in jest. But maybe having a conversation that specifically deals with active transportation and how we could see it devolving, because we are hitting our budget process at that time as well, and we are going to be hitting our OCP shortly after that. I'm not interested if it's worth a GPC on that.
Just a comment on that, I think on the upcoming discussion on the committee's schedule now for September 30th, how ideas of potential GPC topics get onto the agenda is going to be discussed, and potentially in that discussion, even I'm noticing at the end of the GPC meetings now, we can always have a section of time, and then we can have a motion to have a certain item on the agenda if there's enough interest, say, in transportation or whatnot. And I think that we'll have that conversation on the September 30th. Councilor Armstrong.
Following up on Councilor Bonner's thing, I think too, if we do that we should be talking about, so people understand the cost just to do one block of sidewalk. Because I don't think people really grasp that it's not cheap. So I think that's stuff we need to get out when you hear, how come we want to have sidewalks? Well, it would cost us probably $1 billion to do sidewalks, if you actually look at how many are required. So I think that would be a conversation I think would be good for the public to see when we hear back from staff, well, just this little portion cost you this little money.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, but it strikes me as we bring more of these reports back to you that the place to start with those reports is here at GPC, at least some of those. And if we're doing a terms of reference for that transportation, there's a place where we can zoom out of it and have a broader conversation, same with some of these other topics. So we're spending enough time there. So we talked to Mr. Lindsay about the timing, but instead of just dropping those terms of reference into a council meeting, for example, that just doesn't feel right. It seems like maybe they should be coming here first and then reference. That way it gives you the time to get your head around and get the necessary information that you're looking for. I don't think we have to drag it out, but we're launching a lot of big, important topics. And we are in the process of doing budgets, which will be coming forward at the end of November. So there's going to be a lot of stuff on your plate and ideas. So somehow this all has to come together. So we need this kind of forum for you to have the opportunity to roll up your sleeves in it. So I think we can address your question through that forum, hopefully.
Any other questions? Great. Yeah, I do hope at this September 30th GPC, a larger discussion about sort of more structuring, how we can format the GPC to have ideas, or if there's like a conversation that needs to happen with a bit more informality, that there's a chunk of 15, 20 minutes that we can bring something in where we don't need a lot of staff presentation around, but just a quick discussion on an item, and we can have multiple items in that sense as opposed to just one or two. Any other question or comments about the upcoming scheduled topics?
It's a recurring topic item on your agendas, just in case you need to visit.
And I think as we have the discussion, it'll flush out. It's a bit more formal how we can proceed with this item. So, question period. Looks a little blank there. No questions. So could we get a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Councillor Martin. Seconded by Councillor Hemmons. All in favor? Motion carried.